Megan graduated from a top university, and I am truly proud of her. Compared to that, Olivia only finished high school. Honestly, I can hardly believe she is my child. The moment those words reached my ears, I almost dropped the pie plate I had been arranging. It was my mother's voice. She had spoken it without hesitation to the relatives beside her. On her face, pride and disappointment were clearly mixed together. I could not even call out to her, and I simply walked away quietly. Today's Thanksgiving was also a special gathering to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. Once again, my sister would be praised as the pride of the family, while I would be treated as the high school graduate waitress once again. But somewhere deep in my heart, something had quietly begun to crack. The grand party for my mother's 60th birthday included not only relatives but also neighbors, and the living room of our house was filled with food and laughter. As I was setting the pies I had brought on the table, Megan approached me smoothly with a glass in her hand. She wore a brand new dress, looking every bit like the star of the party. Meanwhile, my outfit was a dark checkered shirt and black pants. Casual, but as if I had placed myself on the side of those helping rather than celebrating. "Olivia, thank you so much for today." She said this while patting my shoulder in an exaggerated way. In gatherings like this, practical skills really matter, don't they? See? Your waitress experience really comes in handy here. For a moment, I was at a loss for words. It sounded like a phrase of gratitude. But in reality, it carried the meaning that a high school dropout had nothing to offer except using her hands. "I'm honored to be useful." That was all I replied before gently brushing her hand aside and leaving the spot. "Olivia, are you done with your waitress shift?" My Aunt Alyssa asked me that. "Yes, I worked until this morning, but I took the day off properly for today." I answered with a smile, but in her eyes there was a hint of pity. "Our Megan has even been asked to give a lecture soon. She works at an international NGO." I heard my mother speaking proudly with the neighbors across the table. "That's amazing. It really makes a difference to have a university degree." Someone responded like that. "And Olivia?" "She only finished high school. She didn't go to college. Well, she is working, but unlike Megan." My mother's voice dropped slightly, and laughter followed. As I raised my drink to my lips, I counted silently in my head. How many times had I heard such conversations? Each time I had forced myself to endure it. Even though the efforts I never showed anyone and the realities I never told anyone truly existed within me. It was at that moment. Megan stood up with a glass in her hand, smiling as she looked around the room. "Everyone, thank you for coming today. I am so happy that so many people are here to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. I would like to offer a toast to my mother." And, for a brief moment, her eyes met mine. "To the family as well. To those who understand the importance of education and have built proper careers." The room instantly fell silent. Except, of course, for Olivia, the high school graduate waitress. For a moment, the air froze. Then, in the next instant, giggles began to rise from among the relatives. My mother covered her mouth with her hand and chuckled. My father at first wore a troubled expression, but soon he averted his eyes and began to shake his shoulders in laughter. No one stopped it. No one tried to defend me. In that moment, my existence within this elite family was reduced to nothing more than the punchline of a joke. The room was filled with light laughter, but to me it sounded like the sound of my dignity being trampled. Inside, I felt something click sharply into place. I stood up. "That's funny, Megan." I felt slightly relieved that my voice was not trembling. Adjusting the glass in my hand, I became aware that my voice was quietly echoing. "May I offer a toast as well? To the college graduate who can no longer pay for her own belongings. And to the decision that from today, all financial support will be stopped." Megan froze, her mouth hanging open, unable to grasp the meaning of my words. The relatives around us began to stir, and the calm atmosphere of the party instantly shifted into one of tension. But Megan alone was left behind by that change. as if she had not yet realized that her world was beginning to crumble. No, she did realize it, but she had not yet managed to understand that reality. The fact that the foundation of her supported life was collapsing beneath her feet at this very moment. It seemed it would take a little more time for all of that to reach her. "Olivia, what are you saying?" The voice she finally managed to produce was in a tone I had never heard from her before. It was neither confident nor sarcastic nor triumphant. It was unconscious fear. A voice mixed with confusion, terror, and the desperate wish not to believe. Slowly, I set down my glass. And then I looked straight into her eyes and spoke. "Exactly what I said, Megan. The life you've been living until today was not supported by our parents. It was me." Her eyes widened, but she still did not seem to believe it. "The Parent Plus loans for the university you attended, I've been the one paying them back. The scholarships weren't enough, were they? Our parents had already been struggling financially. I even paid your apartment rent and continued to do so after your graduation." That's a lie. Mom was. Mom said at first she would work and pay it back. But in the end, she never paid a single cent. Year after year, it just dragged on. And it became natural for me to shoulder it all. Her lips trembled slightly. I did not stop speaking. There was no reason to stop. The utilities for this house have also been withdrawn from my card for the past several years. Why would you do something like that? When I heard her mutter those words, I answered quietly. Because we are family. When Dad got sick and couldn't work anymore, I stepped in to help. I told our parents many times that we should tell you the truth, but each time Mom cried and begged me not to tell you, Megan. There was no need to raise my voice. The calmer I remained, the heavier the weight of my words became. That can't be, even the rent. I thought I was sure it was Mom and Dad. Yes, you were always sure about everything. When you complained after graduating that your salary was too low, I said nothing. But I can't do this anymore. Wait, I didn't know. I really didn't know. Isn't it more accurate to say you never tried to know? I looked her straight in the eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it immediately. You never once tried to ask about Dad's worsening health or the fact that he couldn't work anymore, did you? Did you ever think about who was supporting the household? With your so-called brilliant mind from a top university, how could you not notice? Because Mom never said anything. And I was supporting Mom too. Utilities, medical expenses. The reason our parents pretended they could keep up with rent was simply because they didn't want you to worry. I turned quietly toward my mother. She could say nothing and lowered her head. On her face was an expression filled with complicated emotions, as if she were about to burst into tears. Her lips quivered, opening as if searching for words. "Olivia, please stop. Why won't you tell Megan the truth? Well, for years I've been treated like the family wallet. Yet every time we gather, I'm publicly called the high school dropout. Why am I the only one who has to endure this?" My father lowered his gaze. He said nothing. Megan had collapsed into her chair as if crumbling. "And also I was planning to pay for the party expenses, but you can pay them yourselves. That's over now." On my phone, I began stopping each automatic transfer one by one. The rent account for Megan's apartment and others. I felt myself closing each channel of support. "Wait, hold on," Megan said in a faint voice. "You can't just tell me this all of a sudden. I don't know what to do. I was suddenly forced one day to start supporting you, but I never complained once. While managing my own life, I desperately supported this family. I gave more than enough. Honestly, I thought it was unfair to keep supporting a family that labeled me as the dropout. But blood ties aren't something you can just cut off easily. And I believed, somewhere deep down, that you would graduate safely from college and build a proud career. I thought it was worth it to protect your future. And more than anything, I didn't want to see Mom and Dad break any further. That's why I carried everything. But you're not a child anymore, so handle it yourself." I looked straight at Megan. You stood all this time on the foundation of my support while looking down on me for being just a high school graduate. But now I'm pulling that foundation out from underneath you." The room was silent. One relative cleared their throat, but no one said anything to me. No one met my eyes. This isn't revenge, it's just a boundary. Leaving those words behind, I quietly walked away. In the car on my way home, I recalled the day when everything changed for my family. A few years earlier, my father had fallen seriously ill and became unable to work long term. The income that had supported the family until then was gone, and the household finances quickly deteriorated. My mother was completely exhausted, but Megan had already moved into her apartment to prepare for college life and had no chance to know about Dad's condition or the state of the household. But they never consulted me, never asked me for help. They simply drained my father's retirement pay and savings, trying desperately to maintain the same life as before. So why did I end up knowing the truth? It was because one day when I visited home, I happened to see my father's hospital receipts and unpaid bills. I hesitated. Was I really obligated to help the family that had looked down on me for years as a dropout? And yet, I could not abandon them. Blood ties and also the lingering hope that Megan would graduate safely and build a proud career kept me going at the time. And above all, I did not want to see my parents pushed any further into despair. So, in secret, from the revenue I earned through my online business, I decided to cover everything: my father's medical expenses, the utilities for my parents' home, Megan's apartment rent, and even the repayments for the Parent Plus loans. It amounted to an enormous sum every month, but the business was steadily growing and I managed to handle it. After graduating from high school, I did not go to college but worked as a waitress. Yet alongside my work as a waitress, I launched an online business which I built up and made successful over several years. When I first began working as a waitress, I was only struggling to get through daily life. But gradually, through meeting many people in that job, I gained one certainty. It was that the world held many wonderful things, but without the right place and method, they would simply remain hidden. In the suburbs of my town, there was a woman artisan who quietly produced goods using traditional methods passed down for generations, yet without any proper sales channels. The pottery she made was beautiful, warm to the touch. But with her products placed only in small local shops, very few people knew their value. I began to think that I wanted to deliver her wonderful creations not only across the country but to the world through the internet. Alongside my shifts as a waitress, I would open my laptop in cafes late at night, teaching myself how to build websites, and eventually I started my online business from home. At first, I had no idea where to begin and failed over and over again. Taking product photos, writing appealing descriptions, arranging logistics, setting up payment systems. Everything was uncharted territory, and my savings quickly ran out. I cut down on sleep, stopped socializing with friends, and spent all my time facing the computer. With my body already tired from waitress work, the extra weight of responsibility was harsher than I had ever imagined. Countless times I asked myself, does this really have any meaning? But every time a small order came in, every time I received a warm message from a customer, a genuine spark of joy lit inside me. It was not the same as being praised by my family. It was the pure sense of accomplishment that came from achieving something entirely on my own. Years later, my online business spread through word of mouth and eventually brought in revenue far beyond what I had ever imagined. Yet, I never told anyone about that success. Not my family, not even my friends. It remained my secret alone. It was both my pride and my quiet resolve. And I understood. I knew that if my family found out about my success, their attitude would change. That was why, before relationships could become distorted, I chose to keep my success locked deep inside my heart. It was not something to show off to anyone, nor something to use for proving others wrong. It was for me to believe in my own worth. My sister is just a high school graduate, so you wouldn't understand this, right? Megan said that about half a year after she started attending college. I had just begun working as a waitress, still dragging the exhaustion from late-night shifts when I showed up at a family gathering. At first, I tried to take it as a light joke. But the atmosphere in the family had truly changed. When the conversation turned to Megan's reports or her seminars, my parents' eyes would light up. My mother would say again and again, "You are our pride," and my father would smile and say, "We're excited for your future." Meanwhile, the looks directed at me were as if they were gazing down at the bottom of society. My mother outwardly seemed worried, saying, "Are you taking care of your health? Don't push yourself too hard." But she saw my work as nothing more than a part-time job anyone could do. My father would say, "One day you'll meet someone good." Being a full-time housewife is also an honorable path, implying that for a woman with no education or career, that was the only proper ending. To them, I was someone whose life needed to be fixed, not someone to be accepted as I was. At every gathering, the sense of alienation grew stronger. My relatives would shower Megan's academic background with praise, while I was only mentioned in passing with comments like, "Olivia seems to be doing fine." Honestly, it would be a lie to say I did not feel frustrated. But more than frustration, I felt an emptiness. If effort, income, and achievements were all invalidated by one-word education, then what was my life worth? Still, I said nothing. I already knew that even if I spoke, my words would not reach them. I could never be the pride of the family. But even though I was simply living an ordinary life, why was I treated as though I were inferior? Once I even consulted my parents about telling Megan the truth. Since Dad became too sick to work, I've been paying the rent. I've also been covering the Parent Plus loans. I want Megan to take a part-time job and at least start to become financially independent, even just a little. But my mother said, "Please don't tell Megan. She's already overwhelmed with her studies. I don't want her to worry unnecessarily. I'll work and pay it back, okay?" Pressed by those words, I stayed silent. Reluctantly, I decided not to tell my sister anything. Pretending everything was as usual, I continued supporting their lives in secret, to protect my parents' pride and my sister's future. After Megan graduated from college, I heard she got a job at an NGO organization. Socially, it was a respectable job, but she herself admitted that the salary was not high. And as expected, she asked our parents, "Could you please keep helping with the rent just a little longer?" When I heard about that, something like a knot formed deep inside my chest. If she had already graduated from college, she should have started living on her own. That was what I believed, and I told my parents so many times. Stop spoiling her. She's not a child anymore. I urged them to cut off the rent support, but they kept avoiding the issue. In the end, I once again ended up secretly covering the rent for that apartment. Megan continued to believe that our parents were the ones helping her. It was my secret sacrifice alone. And inside me, that burden slowly grew heavier and heavier. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The aftertaste, or rather, the wreckage of last night's party still smoldered in my heart, but strangely, I felt no regret. It was something that needed to be said, and I finally said it. That was the sense I had. But spoken words can fade into ambiguity. So I decided to leave a record of the facts. 7 years' worth of support records. The repayment history of Megan's Parent Plus loans. The rent for her apartment, my parents' insurance premiums, and even the expenses for the parties. I organized everything neatly into a spreadsheet. When I saw the total amount, I was shocked to myself. It had exceeded roughly $50,000. Enough to buy a house. I titled the file simply Support Record and attached it to the family group chat. The message read, "This is the record of what I have been paying for 7 years. It summarizes who has spent how much and on what. From this point on, all support will end. From now on, take care of things on your own." A few minutes later, 3 read marks appeared. Mom, Dad, Megan. The first to respond was my mother. "What do you mean take care of things on our own? You know we can't handle it." Then my father. "Olivia, Let's calm down. Let's have a discussion. It's not good to end things like this. I did not reply. What meaning could there be now in holding another discussion? Only actions can tell the truth now. By midday, a private message arrived from Megan. This has to be a lie. I really didn't know. Why didn't you tell me sooner? At last, I replied. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't say it because of our parents. And besides, even if I had said it, no one would have been grateful and there would have been no point. But when you treated my existence so lightly yesterday, that was the moment I realized there was no meaning left in staying silent. After a while, her message showed as read, but no reply came. The next day, I got a phone call from my father. His voice was tense, unusually so no, as if I was hearing that tone for the first time. Olivia, can't you reconsider? It was wrong of us to rely on you all this time. We regret it. I stayed silent, listening. My father's words sounded unsteady. It was wrong of us not to tell Megan the truth. So blaming her is. I'm not blaming her. Whatever happens to her now is none of my concern. That's all there is to it. When I answered quietly like that, my father fell silent for a moment. Then, after a small sigh, he said, "Just now, Megan contacted me. Apparently her boyfriend broke up with her. He heard about yesterday and said he couldn't trust her anymore. She was crying. I've never heard her so shaken before." I took a deep breath. That's not my fault. It's the result of her own behavior, isn't it? But still, she's family. For that family, I spent 7 years of my own money and time, asking for nothing. And if that earns me the title of the high school dropout, then I'm no longer part of that definition of family. My father said nothing. Silence lingered, and then the call ended. The next day, Megan's social media went private and the family group chat fell silent. As I returned to my work, I felt strangely clear. I no longer needed anyone's recognition. I had not betrayed myself. That was enough. A few weeks after Thanksgiving, I was drinking coffee on my sofa at home. The season had grown colder. The city was dressed in Christmas preparations, but my heart was calm instead. Until then, I had been the quiet supporter within the family. But now I had become the one steering my own life. The difference was immense. That day, the doorbell rang. On the intercom screen appeared the worn-out figure of Megan. Her eyes were swollen, and her hair was disheveled. "Open the door." I silently opened it. Megan entered without a word and quietly sat down on the sofa. Why do I have to go through this? Her voice trembled as she spoke in a rush. "My boyfriend dumped me. I have to move out of my apartment. People at work are spreading weird rumors about me. It's all your fault. Because you said those things at the party." I looked straight at her and answered calmly. "Those things. I only stated the facts. Or did you expect the high school dropout to just stay silent and endure whatever comes her way?" The moment Megan averted her eyes, I continued. "Think about how you've treated me. Judging me by my education, refusing to acknowledge any of my efforts or my life. You were the one who treated me as the family disgrace, weren't you?" I paused for a beat and then said firmly, "I am no longer your safety net. If you judge people by their education, then live by your own education. You're the college-educated elite, aren't you?" Megan stayed silent for a while at my words. Then, after a moment, she exhaled softly and stood up. "Fine, I won't rely on you anymore. I'll handle things myself." There was a trace of frustration in her voice, but no further excuses. I nodded quietly. "That's best. I want you to truly face your own life." Even when I said that, she gave no reply. For a moment, she looked as if she were about to say something, but her lips closed again. Without meeting my eyes, Megan walked toward the door. I had no way of knowing how much of my words had reached her. She simply opened the door in silence and left without looking back. From then on, my life changed drastically. I quit my waitress job and focused entirely on my online business. My days were filled with negotiations with new clients and preparations for opening a physical store. Product development, reworking logistics, hiring staff. As I tackled each new challenge one by one, I began to believe in my own strength. I worked late into the night preparing materials, and at times I even drove myself to meet with clients. Yet what I felt was not fatigue but a solid sense of fulfillment. The joy of seeing what I had built with my own hands take shape before my eyes was incomparable. As for my parents, once I told them, I will continue supporting the household and Dad's medical expenses only, they finally began to accept reality. After that, my mother began working to cover her own living expenses. For her, who had spent many years as a housewife, it could not have been easy, but she must have had no choice but to accept. This is reality. Even while feeling lost, she had no option but to take a step forward. My father was grateful that his medical expenses could still be covered, but he seemed weighed down by deep regret and helplessness, knowing that his broken body had led to the collapse of the family. They were finally forced to face the reality that they were now the ones being supported. Since that day, I have not heard from Megan even once. However, according to a mutual friend, while continuing her previous job, she moved into a cheaper apartment and supplemented her insufficient living expenses with side work. That is what I heard. The arrogance she once carried had vanished, and she was said to be desperately facing reality. When I imagined her abandoned by her boyfriend and left to shoulder everything on her own, I felt a faint tightening in my chest. But what I had given her was, I believe, an opportunity painful but necessary for her to stand up on her own strength. If the day ever comes when she stands on her own 2 feet and appears before me again, then perhaps at that time we could build a different kind of relationship. High school dropout. Those words no longer have the power to wound me. My life is the one I chose, the one I built, and the one I walk. And that steady stride itself is my pride.